Alright, Shalom. First and foremost, I'm going to start this lesson off by giving all the praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakudash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Honors to all the brothers who are fervently preaching the word in sincerity and in faith. Shalom to the sincere Akwath, and Shalom to all the sincere Israelites who are scattered amongst these heathen nations and look like these heathen nations. Now this lesson is going to be basically another update on this conflict, this U.S. Israel Iran conflict / war. So through the Spirit, I'm going to read this article, get some precepts, and Lord's will, you're edified. It says key developments. President Donald Trump declined to give a timeline for resolving the Iran war on Thursday, telling reporters at the White House, "Don't rush me." The U.S. president blamed what he described as a lack of clear leadership in Tehran for holding up talks as pressure grows from the war's global economic impact. Says a ceasefire in Lebanon has been extended by 3 weeks after Israeli and Lebanese representatives met at the White House, Trump announced. The conflict between Israel and Hezbollah has been among the key factors discussed in U.S.-Iran peace efforts. It says U.S. military officials are developing new plans to target Iran's capabilities in the Strait of Hormuz if the current ceasefire falls apart, sources told CNN. Trump has ordered the U.S. Navy to attack any Iranian boats placing mines in the waterway. Yeah, so basically if they start doing that, that's going to pop things off again. If the U.S. Navy starts attacking Iranian ships, then Iran is going to start firing back. And see, this is the spirit that the Lord has on these leaders, the leaders in Iran and, obviously Trump here in the U.S. The Lord has the spirit on them to just keep clashing with each other. That's why myself and other brothers have been saying that there's not really going to be any peace. All of these ceasefires and peace negotiations, it's all going to fail. Proverbs 21:1. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord Yahweh. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. And the Lord could easily have it, whereas, the leaders in Iran or Tehran and, Donald Trump and his administration come to an actual peace agreement and everything calms down. But the Lord doesn't want that. The Lord wants there to be conflict. The Lord wants there to be division. The Lord wants there to be hostilities and violence and war. So that's the direction in which he's turning things. That's why whenever it seems like, there will be some peace negotiations or a ceasefire happening, the Lord may put the spirit on Trump to, say something hostile or make threats. And then the other side is like, well, if that's how you feel, then we can, keep this war going. And then whatever peace talks there were, it just goes right out the window. Because ultimately, the Lord is leading the U.S. into World War III so that he can wipe this place off the face of the earth. Luke 12:51. Suppose ye that I am come to give peace on earth? I tell you nay, but rather division. And clearly that's what's happening. Nobody is sitting here saying that Iran is like an innocent place, and that nothing bad ever happens over there. Yeah, there's a lot of bad things that happen over there. But in regards to this war in particular, this was started by the US and Israel. So a lot of people are not on the US and Israel side because they're like, the US and Israel bombed Iran. So they started it. Iran retaliating is merely them defending themselves from Edomite aggression. And then because of this war, the global economy is suffering and being heavily impacted. And Trump is trying to spin it and make it Iran's fault and be like, well, they closed off the Strait of Hormuz and all of this. And it's like, they wouldn't have done that had you not attacked them. You started this. And now everybody's getting affected by it and they're calling you out for starting it, and you don't like that. Because one thing about Esau is that even though he has always been and will always be the bad guy, he constantly is trying to play the victim. He's always trying to make himself seem like he's the one who's being targeted and attacked, and he didn't do anything wrong. Meanwhile, none of this chaos would have occurred had he not attacked Iran. He started this. He didn't, what's the word I'm looking for? Consult. There it is. Dawadi Yahal Bashim Yahushai. He didn't consult his other Edomite counterparts, whether they be in the UK, Italy, Germany, France. He didn't, Trump didn't consult his Edomite counterparts when he decided to bomb Iran. That's why, the US's allies don't want to help. That's why they don't want to get involved, because they're like, you didn't ask us our opinion before you decided to start this war. You just went ahead and did it. And now you want us to help you clean up the mess you made. And Trump is sitting here talking about, they're weak and they're cowards and things like that. And it's like, no. They didn't ask for this war. They didn't start this war. They didn't help you start this war. So why should they get involved? The reason why the global economy is suffering is because of the US and Israel just being the warmongering devils that they've always been. And the whole world is turning against them. Even here in the US, you have a lot of people who are turning more and more against the government because people can't afford gas. People can't afford to pay their bills. People can't afford groceries. People can't afford to take a vacation. People don't have money to do anything. But yet the government seems to have millions and millions of dollars to put into this illegal war. People are homeless. People are starving in the streets. The infrastructure of America is just horrible. And yet all the money that could be going to fix these things instead is going to fund these illegal wars that the US loves to get itself involved in. And people are pissed off, and rightfully so. And that's just going to result in sedition amongst men, because obviously you have the people who are against what's happening, and then you have the brain dead, simple-minded people who are all for what's happening. And they have their head up Trump's behind, and they're just cheering on all the wickedness that he's doing. And that ultimately is going to turn into civil war and race wars here in America. Ecclesiastes 3:1. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. Jump down to verse 8. A time to love and a time to hate. A time of war and a time of peace. And we are clearly in a time of war. That's why, the Russia-Ukraine war is happening. That's why this Israel, Lebanon, U.S., Iran war is happening. Because the Lord is a man of war. That's why there's going to be civil war and race wars that are going to break out here in the U.S. Like every version of war is about to take place. And the most extreme and deadly of them will be World War III. When all of these nations get dragged into this war out there in the quote-unquote Middle East. And it gets escalated to the point of those buttons getting pushed and those nukes flying. And there's a lot of people that are like, oh, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Nobody would allow that to happen. What was it, like just a week or two ago? Trump was like, it was like this close to nuking Iran. Talking about he was going to wipe out a whole civilization. And the only reason why he didn't was first and foremost because it's not time yet, so the Lord didn't allow it to happen. And the Lord put the spirit on one of the generals to basically shut that down and tell Trump, like, no, you're not getting these nuclear codes so that you can, launch a nuke against Iran. Because once that happens, once the U.S. fires a nuke on Iran, the whole world is going to nuke America. Because they're like, nah, man, like that's too far. Because Iran does not have nuclear missiles. So that wouldn't even be fair at that point. And the world, because, once again, it wasn't time for the end of America. But the world, sat back when the U.S. dropped those bombs on Japan, on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The world didn't do anything. But this time, a lot more of these countries, they have nuclear missiles of their own. And the thing is that it looks like, this is how it looks. It's like if Trump nuked Iran and these other countries that have nuclear missiles didn't do anything, then that would just make Trump think that he could just launch nukes on anybody that he just didn't like. If he decided that he was pissed off at the UK, he just wanted to, launch a nuke on them, even though they're supposed to be America's allies. He would feel emboldened to do that because he would have gotten away with it. And that right there is the pride of Esau. And don't get it twisted. All of these Edomites, whether they're in the US, the UK, Canada, Germany, France, Italy, wherever in the world they are, they're all devils. They're all Edomites. The Lord hates all of them. But the Edomites here in the US, in the United States of America, they are the worst of the worst. They are the most proud, the most arrogant, the most violent, just demons. And that's why even Edomites in these other countries are looking at the Edomites over here some type of way. Because they're like, okay, like y'all are over there in the US are doing way too much. And the fact that Trump, you know, got on Truth Social and was talking about wiping out Iran, wiping out their whole civilization. He was planning on nuking them. It's like everybody's like, okay, like he's a complete madman. And you have a lot of people in these other countries that are looking at the US and being like, yo, why aren't you Americans doing anything? Why are you letting him act like this? You know? And it's ultimately because this is what the Lord wants. This is the Lord's program. And a lot of people keep forgetting that, or they don't know that. If the Lord wanted to, he could put the spirit on people to overthrow the government, or for whoever has the power to, you know, to remove Trump from being the president. But the Lord doesn't want that. And the men of the Lord believe that Trump is going to be the guy that's going to fully lead the U.S. into World War III. And that's going to result in the nuclear destruction of the U.S. and Israel. Because Israel is the Lord's chosen land, but there's nothing but heathens in the Lord's favorite land right now. So that land has to be cleansed of those people. So when the Lord does allow World War III to go full blown, the U.S. and Israel are the two nations that are going to get wiped out. The only difference is that the land of Israel is going to be rebuilt by these Edomites and these other heathen nations once the kingdom of heaven is established and these heathens get put into slavery. Basically that's what that 1,000 years is going to be. It's going to be these heathens building up the kingdom of heaven, rebuilding the land of Israel. And then after that 1,000 years is up, these Edomites, who are the so-called self-proclaimed white people, they're going to get rounded up, and the Lord is going to erase them off the face of the earth, because they are the wicked with a capital W that the Lord created. And once the kingdom of heaven is established, outside of using these Edomites to rebuild, is the land of Israel, outside of that, he's not going to have a use for them. So once that's over, once that's done, and they no longer serve a purpose, they're going to be wiped out. Because the nation of Edom is the only nation that has not been granted any form of repentance. See, these other nations, once their slavery is up, they're going to get put back into their lands. But as far as these so-called self-proclaimed white people, there is no land for them. They're going to die. They're going to be erased off the face of the earth. The very thing that these Edomites want to do to everybody else is what the Lord is going to do to them. And it's kind of ironic that way. It's also ironic that the same way that Esau came into power, through violence and war, is going to be the same way that the Lord takes him out of power. So we are in a very beautiful time, but we're also in a very dangerous time. That's why all you sincere brothers and sisters, you got to stay circumspect. And you got to continue to watch. And you definitely got to stay prayed up. Because things are going to get a lot more volatile and hostile and active and violent in these last days. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up here. In closing, I want to give all the praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahushai, Bahashim, Rakakudash. The Wadi Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahushai, for putting his spirit on me to do this lesson. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Honors to our brothers who are still fervently preaching the word in sincerity and in faith. And shalom to all the sincere Akwath and to all the sincere believers who are scattered amongst these other nations and look like these other nations. Hope you all stay strong, stay safe, stay fervent, stay circumspect, stay prayed up, and Adawan Ratazah. Until next time, Shalom.